Fierce, passionate leadership. What does it mean to be a leader in real estate? There's so many challenges, so many opportunities. And I'm here today with Christan Bosley, who is the president and broker of record at Bosley Real Estate. It's going to be a great conversation.
Thanks so much for having me on, Leah. I'm so excited.
Me too. I'm totally excited because we're getting an inside look into what your journey was to becoming the president of Bosley, probably breaking a lot of assumptions that people have had and really helping people understand how important it is to have strong leadership and someone who's as passionate and caring as you are.
Thank you. I think the first thing to understand really clearly is that there are so many assumptions in real estate. It's actually kind of embarrassing. So I'm happy to have an opportunity to sit and talk with you and share some of those milestones.
Thank you. So, okay, why don't we start with your journey, right? We are a fourth generation family-led.
No pressure, huh?
No pressure.
Yeah, 96 years and counting. My journey. So I started actually at the front desk when I was, 13 or 14. And at the time, my godmother was front desk, reception full-time. And I distinctly remember sitting beside her. We had our office located at Yonge and Lawrence. And she said to me, "You know, dear, this is a really great opportunity for you to work with your family, but it can't be everything you have. You're going to have to spread your wings and go elsewhere at some point." And I don't know why it sticks out to me so seriously, but probably because I just never did that. Okay. I started working here and I've worked here my entire life. Yeah.
Pressure. Mm-hmm. I guess that's what I think about, right? Mm-hmm. Like in terms of that sticking in your mind, being so young, like, do you feel that you had no choice or do you feel like you fell into it?
It's funny you say that. So when I call agents that I want to get to know to determine whether they're right for the brand, one of the very first questions I ask them is why real estate? And I really like to know their story and get an understanding for who they are. But one of the very first icebreakers I often will say is, "Oh, so you had a choice to be in real estate. That's really exciting." And, I say it because it generally gets a chuckle. In fairness, I absolutely had a choice. I have an older brother. He is not in the business. He remained in the financial world. So I had a choice, but the pressure is real. And I think at the end of the day, I think when I made the decision to really actually leap into it, I was in university. I had just started fourth year at Western. My dad called and said, it's a family business. I just want to be very transparent. I'm entertaining an offer from Royal LePage to sell the company. And
no pressure.
I think he was expecting me to be like, "Oh, okay, great." And, I understand why he would have that. But I had a real visceral reaction. And I was like, if you came and told me you were selling to an independent, like, Harvey Callis or something a little bit more in alignment with who we were, he might have had a slightly different reaction. But at the end of it, it was quite clear to me that it meant something to the family and that I should probably give it a try before that decision was made. So I started taking my license the next day. I was fully licensed by the time I graduated fourth year.
Wow.
And I took, so I finished my last year in tandem with taking that. And then I took 2 months off and traveled. My mother was president of the Canadian Association at the time. It is truly a family business. And I traveled all over Europe with her that summer. And I started working in sales in August 2007.
Okay. So definitely, was there a choice? I love, the conviction that you, at the core of it, it is your conviction that led you to make your decisions. Because for someone who's in fourth year university to hang up the phone and go, "Okay, I'm actually going to actualize and I'm going to sign up to start this process." Like, I think that's a testament to who you are as a person. And I see that in how you lead our company.
Thank you.
And you've just only recently, from 2007 to now, and more recently, you've just taken the reins, right? You've done every job.
Yeah. So I started at front desk. And then I wrote all the training manuals for our part-timers. I ran the part-time schedule, hired all the part-timers. Then I moved to, I also rotated all the offices. So I got to know all the agents. Whether that was good or bad is yet to be determined because many of them are still with us as they, watched me grow up. Not necessarily the greatest experience for them, I imagine. So I went from there into marketing and I worked in our graphics team for quite some time. I've worked in admin. The only department I have not worked in is accounting.
Right.
Numbers are not my thing. Spreadsheets are not my thing. We have a wonderful VP of finance that, works alongside me to make sure that, we have more coming in than going out at the end of the day in terms of a business. But every department but accounting. And then I went into sales and I sold for 12 years.
I think that is not always the tried and true path for many people who will assume, take over a family business. So I think that you have really lived it in every aspect. Now that you are the president of Bosley, you're sitting at a lot of different tables. Mm-hmm. And, I'd love us to talk about what that journey is like, especially as we had talked offline before about often being the only woman at that table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really fascinating because, International Women's Day comes and goes every year. And more often than not, I don't think much about it. But a couple of years ago, it clicked to me that I don't think much about it because, in particular in this industry, my mother led the way. Yeah. Right. She was the first female president of the Canadian Association. She was instrumental in negotiating with the Competition Bureau for what we see in our industry today. I mean, there were so many milestones that she paved the way for that made it easier for women like me. So it was a privilege. I had this kind of real reflection moment where I thought to myself, it's a privilege that I don't think about this, that I don't celebrate it. And it should be recognized. So now I take it a lot more seriously than certainly I ever have before. But, for me, the journey was full of, yes, I'm the first female president and broker of record at Bosley. I am really one of the only girls generationally anyway, one of the only women. So I'm not sure if that was more of a gender bias and time of, the decades rather than just, it was all male anyway. Yeah. But what I will say is, my father is a fairly typical baby boomer. He has always supported women in business. And I was so, so privileged to have that. And I witnessed my entire life, my mom pulling the strings behind the leader. So it was really a unique opportunity for me to see the ins and outs of how their relationship in particular functioned, because my mom ran the best branch in the city of Toronto at that time, and my dad was president of the company. So their interactions and engagements at the table were really fascinating. But today, I'm still very often when we have, central broker meetings or when I go sit at the TREB board, there is certainly representation of females on those boards at this time. But I think real estate is still very liberal in that regard. There's certainly much more balance in our business, I believe, than many others in this city at the moment.
It's so true, right? Because real estate offers people the opportunity to pick and choose their schedules. And I think, I don't know if I remember the statistic correctly, but with women who are juggling families, right? They're able to center family life with work and to grow that. And I jokingly always say work-life balance. As someone who is a full-time agent, I've always been the type of person that has been all in anything that I do. And I find work-life balance to be a bit of, we say that, but is it really achievable?
Well, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's just a real estate thing, because as I said, I've only ever been in real estate, but certainly in our industry, there's no way to have that, because if you don't live and breathe what you do, you will not be a success at it. The competition is so fierce in this business that you have to be able to be passionate when you speak about it. You have to be able to answer the questions, to jump into conversation, to really show who you are as the full-time realtor and the professional in what you do. And if you've said to yourself, I'm going to go on vacation and I'm not going to talk real estate for a week, all of those people you meet, you're an undercover realtor and you've missed massive business opportunities. So I believe that, you have to really be passionate about what you do in this business. And if you're not comfortable with that, you're probably not in the right business.
Yeah. I mean, actually, that's really interesting because you are often looking for talent and looking for, who you're going to recruit over, and you have the specific sort of qualities that you're looking for. So if you were to give advice to people who are just entering into the real estate business, because we know we have over 72,000 realtors, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I mean, so much. The great part about this business, as you've indicated, is the flexibility. And you're an independent contractor and you have this incredible ability to really make your own dream come true, right? So, how hard you work, how uncomfortable you are in the role, how often you put yourself out there is going to be directly correlated with how successful you are in the role. So for people who really like control of that business, it's exceptional. You get to meet new people every day. You have different experiences every day. You're not tied to a desk. You see beautiful homes. There's amazing attributes of this industry. I think what people don't see is how hard you have to work. Yeah. So, you can create work-life balance in terms of, I'm going to take the day and spend it with my family, but you're still going to spend 60% of that day talking about real estate. You may not be with clients, you may not be out, actively showing properties, but it's on your mind all the time. Your phone's attached to you. It's, you really have to live and breathe that, as I said. I think the other misperception really is that selling homes is your job. Selling homes is simply a byproduct of doing your job effectively. And doing your job effectively means really mastering, forming those connections with people, really having an understanding for who people are, what they want, what their goals are, and how you can be a partner with them on their journey. And if you're not getting out there, meeting people and making those connections, there's no houses to sell. So I think the biggest mistake people make is, it's easy money. All I have to do is go and meet one person and sell a house. Yeah. Meeting that one person could take 5 years to sell that house. Right? It just really depends on how effective you are at forming those connections.
I think that's a really good point because I have obviously met folks who are like, oh, well, all you do is just sell a house and you make all this commission. I'm like, there's a lot of work that happens that goes behind of getting the maximum value, finding the right place, making sure timing. The market is always shifting and people are like, oh, this market is the same as last year. I'm like, not really. Like we're in an industry which is constantly changing and it's shifting sands. It's having a pulse of where are we now? What's the strategy? And I think one of the things I often try to emphasize to folks is what are your goals? Because that's different than what media is, people hear what media is broadcasting and I'm like, yeah, but that's an overall national piece. This is not super hyper local to where we live right now or what your particular circumstances are.
To be completely honest, I don't envy the realtor right now. Yeah. There's a lot of noise in our industry coming at everybody and most of it is a distraction. Much of it will change the very face of how we do business in the very near immediate future. And every day is an uphill battle. Right? You're either, in your communications with clients, you're either debunking some sort of media headline or, fighting one of our professional organizations on industry changes or, dealing with legalities of a sale that's gone wrong. It's very solution-oriented business. And if you are not somebody who can think creatively and have an ability to recognize the difference between, taking it home with you and leaving it at work, this business can take you down, honestly. And I do think that we're at a juncture in the industry where you have to be able to differentiate. What do I have control over? What don't I have control over? How do I make my statement and yet continue to be very productive in my business?
Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, I was just thinking about an article that recently came out about artificial intelligence replacing realtors. What do you think?
I think that when the internet became a thing, when MLS became a thing, and I think it was like 1991, 1993, somewhere around there, the entire industry went wild, right? Oh, computers are going to replace us and all of this information is available. I go back to my last statement, which is this is a business about connections.
Yeah.
It's about trust. It's about guidance. So yeah, you can have your questions answered by AI. You can go and see houses through the listing agent. You're always going to have all of those opportunities. But at the end of the day, this is your largest investment in life. And the unfortunate reality is that of those, I actually believe the figure is 76,000 realtors. There is a very small percentage of those licensed who are full-time professionals. And as a result, it really dilutes the image of what a realtor should stand for. And I think that's why people come to Bosley, to be completely honest, is we are professionals, we are trained, we focus on all of the ins and outs of being able to help our customers. So when somebody asks, AI a question about real estate, or they see something online and they find sold prices, there are very few meetings where I don't sit up in front of the agents and say, your job is not to provide information. They can find that information.
Yeah.
Your job is to be part of the journey with them and to advise them and to interpret that information.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I see that all the time when I'm working with people. It's like, yeah, you have the information, you've got the stats, but let's navigate your personal situation. AI is not going to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And it's like making those connections where people feel trusted and taken care of. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. Like, we do have so many realtors, and how we show up makes a big difference. I love Bosley. I will tell you, a big part of why I chose Bosley was because I had an exceptional experience with the Bosley agent that brought forth integrity, that brought forth like someone I felt I could trust. Mm-hmm. And I've worked with other agents before, and she stood out in my mind, which is Anita Merlot.
And she's still with us, and she's still exceptional, right?
Absolutely. And that to me was like a gold bar standard of, this is what real estate could look like. Mm-hmm. Right. And
what it should look like.
And absolutely.
Right. And I think the drawback is you're all independent contractors. And so everybody runs their business entirely differently.
Yeah.
And when you have part-time realtors that have full-time jobs, it really makes it challenging for everybody who believes it's a profession.
Yeah, I don't actually know the stats, but I feel like since we've gone through COVID, since we've gone through a huge cultural journey over the past few years, all the Bosley agents who I've dealt with have always been so present and so on top of things. And I feel like everybody has been so committed to real estate. And that's been such a differentiator. Mm-hmm. Because when I've talked to other agents from other brokerages, it's interesting. They're like, we don't get that support, or we don't, mm-hmm. I mean, I'm with Bosley, and I'm biased, mm-hmm. but I believe our Bosley U program mm-hmm. is quite great. It's constantly reiterating itself. So it's not the same thing. It's like, okay, this is new. Let's try this, mm-hmm. which helps make a difference. And when I've spoken and worked with other agents on a deal, they've always said, wow, you're so professional.
It's our reputation, right? You show up at a table, you're on multiple offers representing a buyer. You can guarantee that the listing agent's going to say, what's a Bosley offer? It'll be great.
Yeah.
Our agents are really well trained, but I would say the brokerages are very similar to agents, right? I mean, an agent as an independent contractor has the choice of going to any brokerage in the city. There are tons of different business models when it comes to brokerages. Ours is the full service, full professional model, right? And with that, yeah, you get what you pay for. I say that to agents all the time. I said it to sellers all the time. You can turn around and list with somebody who's going to charge you a 1% commission or a flat fee. But at the end of the day, can you confidently look at yourself in the mirror and say, I got the best price possible for my home. I achieved all of my objectives over and above price, right? Brokerage is very similar. And for me, when you work with Bosley, the expectation is you're trading under my personal name, and I want to know you're trained. I want to understand the legalities behind your transactions. And honestly, I want to know about you as a human, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I am very connected to my agents. I know the ins and outs of everything they're going through for the most part, personally and professionally, because this is a business where everything's intertwined. So I think we have a lot to offer, but of course I am biased.
We're acknowledging that straight up.
But yeah, I think the brokerage models are really interesting. And I think, when we go back to talking about the industry, I do believe the brokerage models are all going to have to adapt to, right? Just like the agents.
What do you think the greatest challenge is right now for brokerages?
Oh, profit margins. Hands down. And, unless you're a fee-based model, which I will never be. So just to put it simply, right, there's, fee-based models where agents will pay desk fees and transaction fees and monthly fees. Those models will always exist so long as they have agents that are prepared to pay them. My model is entirely dependent on the agent being successful in their business. I'm entirely driven by commission splits. Where that becomes challenging, which most full service companies are, is, we used to operate on 50-50 commission structure, 60-40 commission structure. Yeah. And there was so much more to work with in terms of, brand awareness, exposure, lead generation for our agents, service offerings for the agents. Now, we're lucky if we have a 10% margin. We're lucky overall to have that. Yet the demand continues to really be quite strong for more and more and more from the brokerage, right?
Right.
And I would say to you, the exact same thing is happening to you on the client side, right? Lots of pressure to offer more for less. Yeah. And it's quite challenging. And you're also going to, from my perspective, I think brokerages are really going to struggle with adapting to the changes that are coming down the line. There's a massive class action lawsuit in the US. There's the same lawsuit in Canada that is waiting to determine whether it will be class action or not. It's entirely competition commission based. That's going to change the way our entire compensation structure moves forward. We have the Trust in Real Estate Services Act being implemented by RICO, our governing body. That's going to change everything in terms of how we explain relationships, what we can and cannot do for the consumer. I mean, we're going to go from a 1-page document to a 14-page terms of service for a consumer before you can even have a conversation with them. Yeah. I think there's a lot coming down the line in the next year or 2 years that are going to really change everything. And I think brokerages are going to have to adapt, but also be leaders for their agents and really training them to understand what that looks like. And I fear that some of the transactional based brokerages that are perhaps a little bit more discount are going to be really quite left behind in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to take a moment and kind of redirect the conversation to focus a little bit about your leadership style.
Oh, you would know better than I, Lee.
No. I mean, like in terms of success, right? Mm-hmm. Like how, like you are someone who has had to overcome many obstacles, many, like you have great support, mentorship from your family, but at the same time, you have to deal forward facing with, as you had mentioned, agents that saw you growing up. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's a small thing, right?
No, it's very challenging. It's very, very challenging.
So I think in terms of your success strategies, right? Like dealing with perception, dealing with reality, dealing with being a human being, with feelings and growth. We all grow. Nobody is perfect. Mm-hmm. And you grew up in a company, right?
Yeah.
For better or worse.
Wasn't always so pretty. I was not a great teenager. So
Nobody was a great teenager,
I really liked a good party. Everybody saw it. No, I think that's a great question. And I think to your point, my leadership style has really changed quite significantly, certainly through the last 4 years of running the operation. But even when I was an agent, really wrapping my head around the fact that when you work with clients, you are a leader, right? They look to you to lead them in the right direction. So I would say one of the things that I really mastered, I believe, quite skillfully when I was in sales was adapting my personality type to who I was talking to. And honestly, I mean, you will know I have an incredibly strong personality type. I come on really aggressively at times, certainly when I believe in something strongly. And sometimes it can be more of a dictatorship rather than a collaboration. And I think there are circumstances where that is required. Yeah. And there are circumstances where that's not the right approach. So I do feel my sales career really prepared me for that. I also have a degree in psychology. So having an understanding of humans and what makes them tick and motivation and all that kind of stuff has been really beneficial as well. But I would say in terms of leadership, I've had great support from my parents, certainly, when they are engaged. Let's put it that way. You know, my dad has been in the company for 55 years. My mom retired some time ago. So as an example, when, you know, COVID hit, I turned around to my dad, who'd been running the company for 35 years. And I said, well, what do I do? And he said, beats me, right? You're on your own. And there was, you know, it really was like, figure it out. And I had been running the company since about 2018, 2019 at that point. So much of it has been trial by fire. I focus a lot on communications. It's where I get my energy from, and just connecting and communicating with the agents, because I view that as my job. But in terms of actually getting there and adapting my leadership style, like half of our agents saw me grow up. Many of them panicked at the thought of me taking this role, and rightly so, honestly. But I've spent many, many years demonstrating that I am fully capable of doing it, of building it, of taking it to a new height. You know, every generation changed the face of the company as they went along. Since 2019, we've added, 75 new people to our roster. And we're very specific about who we're bringing on. So even just the change in that regard of who's representing us and how they're operating is quite substantial. But I mean, there have been many people along the way. We had somebody on our management team for some time who took me out for dinner and told me unequivocally that I was nothing but a name, that I offered no value to the team, and that I would never be right for this position, and that the moment I took the position, I'd lose all of my top agents. And, he was quite vocal about how little I had to offer him at the time. And I don't think it's a coincidence that, at the time the company was not thriving. And so now we're in a very different position. And I think that when the market is really great, my job is to be supportive. And when the market is not great, my job is to be very directive in what agents have to do to succeed. Yeah. So I just, I'm very aware of the situation. I'm in my head quite a bit by nature, and I spend a lot of time preparing for difficult conversations.
I was just thinking about that thick skin, right? Like to think about, you're like, the president. So it's like Teflon, but I can't imagine what that would be like.
No, and it's funny you say that. The timing is kind of interesting for this conversation. I had a conversation with my VP of finance, I went to Western with, one of our best friends, the other day. And I said, for the first time in my life, my emotions are getting in the way of my decisions. And I said, everything is personal. When you've worked with these people, when they've seen you grow up, when you've talked about them at your dinner table since you were 5 years old, there's very little in that interaction that's not personal. Yeah. And even though it's not intended to be personal, for both sides, it typically is, right? We have a lot of people who have been here for 30 years. You can guarantee that anything that happens to those people, it will feel personal. Right.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the challenges of the family business. And it certainly is something I struggle with. I'm a mom of two. I try very hard not to take my work home with me. But there are days where, I'm beaten up and I'm tired and I'm cranky. And I try very hard not to let people see that. But, it's not always perfect. And I have been known to make massive mistakes. And the one thing I will say about me is I own it. I apologize. I make it right. And I move on. Because the minute you ignore it, you're going to have a much tougher situation on your hands.
But there's so much leadership out there that does do that. And it's not the easy route to stand in front. I've seen you do it. And I'm like, kudos, right? Like, and I think that takes a lot of courage. And I've actually seen so many women who have been in leadership roles where it's almost like a glass ceiling and pushing past it, and then, having to stand in front of it and finding that courage. And I'm like, well, I haven't seen that always mirrored amongst, other male counterparts. And I don't think it's easy. And it's not necessarily to focus on the gender dynamic, but there are unconscious challenges that we have to deal with, whether it's
like you can't be emotional as a woman.
Right. It's like what you said, it's more like a dictatorship. I don't, even that language, I think if it was a male that was like, I just told you what it was like supposed to be. It's not about it being a dictator. No, that's the way it is. I've worked for many CEOs who are male and they would never say, oh, I'm being a dictator. Like, no, that's my decision. You know, like, but I think
it's the unconscious bias.
It's the unconscious bias that exists. But I really always appreciate that you are so, like, you're able to be vulnerable and strong and authentic.
Thank you.
I don't think that's easy.
No.
Like, I'm just like, whoa, you know, and I don't know all the.
You have to put yourself out there, right? You have to put yourself out there. And I think, you know, as I've said a million times, it's about connection. And if I'm not authentic in who I am, how can I expect people to be authentic with who they are? And in a way, it's incredibly positive. It's also my downfall because, you know, people come into my office and I have a Kleenex box and out they go. And
you're the therapist. You're the therapist. You're psychologist.
You know, to the point, you know, it's great that I know that because it impacts how they're moving through their day. And it's important for me to be able to support them. But on the same token, the boundaries become very blurred. And I would say that, you know, my biggest challenge taking this role, going from sales to here is, when I was in sales, I was awful. I was an awful human. And honestly, I didn't want to sell anymore. And part of how I ended up in this position was I said to my dad, you know, I'm not going to do this anymore. You're not present. You're trying to retire. You have somebody in charge who's running the company into the ground and you're not seeing it, but I'm here every day. So now is the time. I'm getting out of sales, whether I go into this position or not. I don't want to do this anymore. Here's my letter of resignation. You have 3 months.
Wow.
And it took 3 weeks before my dad called and said, I heard you. You start in a week. And so I think that he really was quite taken aback by the fact that I was very serious about it. I'd been talking to him about it for a few years, but who I was as an agent was not reflective of who I am as a person.
Yeah.
This business changes people. The money changes people. The competition changes people. What you have to do to secure the business changes people. And I was fortunate enough to be in the top 5 of our company for the last 5 years while I was having children. It was a great experience. I don't regret it. But I could have easily been in the middle of the hall and been certainly much more authentic to who I am. That's just not who I am. I need to succeed at the top level of anything I do, right? So I did wake up one day and I thought, you know, this is not who I want to be. It's not who I want my kids to see. And I was so guarded at the office because I was the boss's daughter.
Yeah.
And everything I did was watched. Everything I said was reported on. And, you know, people were mean, like really, really mean, catty, you know, saying terrible things about me. So I had this wall, right? And I realized quickly that when I stepped into this leadership role, I had to show people who I actually was. And that was probably the most challenging part of the journey.
I feel like there's such a graciousness to that, like of being really guarded and then being like vulnerable to be like, okay. And just to deflect, like, I mean, you know, in that sense of living and breathing and being watched with like a, you know, having things being reported. Oh, did you know? Like, and that's what I mean, where it's like, it's not easy, you know, and all those perceptions and, you know, when you speak or how you present yourself is, I always find such strength in that. Like, I remember when we interviewed and you said, yes, you know what, when I took over, all my managers became women.
It's true. Yeah. I turned that over pretty quickly. Yeah.
You know, and creating an environment that would be conducive to success for all. And I see that when you lead a meeting or even in the actions that you do, it's very like, okay, how can we all rise up together? Right. And I think that there's value in that. I feel like as someone who is on the sales side, as an agent, that people respect that.
Yeah. Thank you. I won't hire somebody who doesn't want the person sitting beside them to succeed. It's one of the very first things I look for.
Yeah, it's so interesting because very recently we had another agent who was showing a condo and I took one of my clients through and then we just had this wonderful camaraderie. And she's like, I never thought that this is how agents would be. And I was like, I think that's the Bosley difference, where we're here to support each other and we want each other to succeed. And that's how we learn from each other. And there has never been a time where I haven't called another agent saying, hey, okay, you've got more experience in this. Tell me, what do you think? And to be able to bounce things off of them and to get their insight. And people are always so forthcoming and sharing. Like, okay, I don't have time right now. Let's talk after. Or, but people are always follow up and are trusting. And I certainly think that is, I've been here for the tenure of your leadership. And so I don't know what it was before, but I certainly think it's a legacy piece that comes down.
It is. Yeah. And as much as people really challenged the thought that I would be successful in this role, the one thing that I hear consistently from our legacy agents, for lack of a better way of saying it, is I'm so thankful that the family core values are back. The person that ran it in the interim was very, very professional, but it was a corporation.
Yeah.
This is a family for me, right? I grew up in it. I live in it. I breathe in it. I believe it. And it's my downfall. When I have an agent leave, it hurts a lot.
Yeah.
But it's not going to change the way I run my business.
Right. Absolutely. So coping mechanisms, strategies, right? Like, what do you do? Like outside of being, the president and everything, but as a leader, what are strategies?
What are strategies? There are very few days that go by where I don't exercise.
Okay.
And I know it's a simple thing, but I don't have any time for me in my day, right?
No,
my kids I have 2 boys. They're 6 and 8 years old. I have an amazing husband who also has a very full-time job. I come here, I have, just shy of 300 agents and a great management team and all the staff, but everybody needs something, right? And that's just life, on top of, my parents and everything there. So the one thing that I will always do is wake up at the crack of dawn, if it means that is the only time in my day for me. So I don't care how tired it makes me. I wake up every day at 5:30 and I get that 5:30 to 6:30 by myself before my kids wake up. And 9 times out of 10, I exercise because I know the endorphins are really positive for me. I'm somebody who also struggles with a bit of anxiety and depression. So that physical exercise is what gets me moving. Other coping mechanisms, I would say, are probably not healthy.
We all have those.
I do really enjoy a Negroni.
Yes.
So, that's really nice. I'm so fortunate to, it's funny that you call me authentic and open at work, and I work so hard to be that way. But I would say in return, when it comes to my personal life, I'm still quite guarded with the agents on that. So, I spend a lot of personal time with a few of the agents, and they will always say, oh, Kristan's very guarded, because I won't talk about my personal life. So I'm really fortunate to have a husband and kids, obviously, but an incredible group of women that I'm part of who, are from all walks. I was never somebody who, was in the in crowd in high school. Like, I've always just done my own thing. I've never had time for the drama. So I have, friends that I grew up with. I have a couple of friends from high school. I have, 5 friends from university. And then I have this kind of adult female group, but none of them really know each other or interact. They're all just kind of separate, which is really interesting. And they all bring me a different type of energy. So I'm really fortunate to have that. And I rely heavily on the ladies, to lift me up when I need it. And I know it's, there's confidence and there's trust, and we like to go out and have a lot of fun. I am somebody who believes in having a lot of fun. So I just try to make sure that I'm, when I'm kind of down, and I've been down and I typically go in hiding, somebody will call and say, it's time. Let's go out for dinner. Let's go grab sushi. Let's go out to the bar, whatever it is. But I always know that somebody will pick up the phone, which is something that I probably take for granted, but also really helps move me forward.
I think that's really powerful about filling your bucket, right? And what is it? We all need that to be like, you talk about like how ingrained and how family oriented all of this is. Like, every breathing part of your organism, of your body is with this office, like Bosley. But I don't think anybody would say, well, you should be guarded by your personal, like, what do you have for yourself, right? Because you need to hold something back for you, because how else will it come back, right? Mm-hmm. I'm curious about, so you've been mentored, but I see you also in a role now of mentoring, which that transition is sometimes I remember I was always the youngest in every group. And all of a sudden I became like, oh, I'm the older one here now, right? So I feel like you're also, I think, fairly young in the career of running a brokerage and everything, but you're now a mentor to others, right? Like, what advice would you give for young people who are starting out their career? It doesn't even have to be real estate related, but survival skills, survival tips, right?
Yeah. Oh man, this is such a canned. I have so many things. Okay. So it's kind of funny that you might, comment on where I am in my career and the mentor versus mentee. So first of all, I always work with a business coach. I truly believe that even if you're 80 years old, you should still have a mentor, right? There should always be somebody that you look up to that's helping you grow as a human. And that won't change for me. The role from, mentee to mentor, I think I really transitioned into quite quickly because I started teaching Bosley U. I think I was 24 when I started teaching Bosley U. I was really young. And I had been in sales for 3 years. And so as people joined the company and went through Bosley U, while they heard, many of the agents talking about who I am and my last name and all this kind of stuff, they also experienced me in more of a facilitator role. So that was really beneficial. And that was, I think, part of why I pushed to have that role so young. So, but right now, I said to one of my girlfriends last night, I said, I got to be honest, I really thought that I would be okay with aging. And I have found myself to be in this position where I get together with the broker of records and I'm the youngest one by like 30 years at a minimum, right? At a minimum. Yeah. And so I go into those situations and I'm like, oh, I'm such a baby. And, I've got so much time left. But then I come here and I look around at all of our new agents and I'm like ancient, right? Like we've got like
not quite, but okay.
But the feeling, feeling is like, oh my God, I can't even talk their language. I don't know what app they're on. Like, what is happening? And so I'm finding myself in this kind of weird position. But I think to me, the mentorship of the agents is what gives me joy. So, we had a really respected member of my leadership team retire last year. Bill Johnston was with us for ages. He was so supportive of me. He was also one of the ones who doubted me. But seeing that transition along the way was really connecting for both of us. But I replaced him, when he told me he was retiring, with somebody who could really take my ideas with the business and move it forward a lot faster than I could, because my energy comes from that mentorship.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily come from building business plans and running numbers and that kind of stuff. So, I think it was just kind of a natural role for me, but something that I struggle with at the same time.
Totally get it. I feel you. I totally get it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I feel like a common thread I have seen and heard from so many like leaders or inspirational people have been waking up really early to carve out time for themselves, but also being very reflective.
Yes.
And that, I think, is that courage to face the day and say, okay, how can I change this? Right. And just being really whole, like just being present and facing challenges. Right. And so that is something which is a common theme that I see with so many people. And I wanted to sort of come to a close with your favorite quote, which I love. You've got two cool quotes. Either you run the day or the day runs you, as well as the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results by Albert Einstein.
Yeah, those are for sure my two favorite quotes. So, I mean, you either run the day or the day runs you. Honestly,
absolutely.
There could not be more truth to that. And I would say that, as you get further along in your career and as you start becoming more successful, certainly in real estate, something's got to give, right? There's only so much that one person can do. So in my instance, I'm really grateful. Like I have a nanny at home who also manages my household, right? I don't do that because I'm tired and it doesn't bring me energy. So, when I was first starting, I would say to anybody who's just starting their career, really having that reflection, understanding what's working, what's not working, taking control of your day, prioritizing the things that give you energy so that you have energy to give back to the world. Those things are really critical, and understanding what those are early on in your career will get you to where you want to go a lot faster, I think. So, and then in terms of the definition of insanity, it drives me crazy. Patience is not my strong suit. Okay. I try so hard, but even when I'm not saying it, my face gives it away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it's like watching someone bash their head against a wall. Like, why are you doing that? It didn't work the first time. You're not doing it any differently this time. Try something new, be uncomfortable, expand your boundaries, get out there, challenge yourself. I'm a big believer in that.
I hear you, because sometimes I feel the same. I'm like, what? Why are we going through this again?
Yeah, the same result. The same exact thing is going to happen. And yet you fail to use critical thinking to think through what that result's going to be, right? I think don't get me started on the generational issues that we have coming in the line, I think. But critical thinking and problem solving is a real challenge.
I hear you 100%. And
I don't think AI is going to help with it.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Because that's one of the things people are facing right now. They're like, how can you think? AI is going to repeat the stuff that has already existed.
Right.
Real estate is about being a problem solver, and you have to be at the forefront of, I see this coming down the line. This is what we have to do. There's every single time I work with a client, it's a different situation. There's no two things that are the same. I actually enjoy that.
It's the joy of the job.
I actually am like, okay, I got a solution for that. And that's what I'm like, yeah, this is why I actually love this career path, because it helps me keep all pistons going.
Yeah.
And keeps me young in that way.
Well, and you're also doing some really cool creative things to get outside of your comfort zone. So it's amazing.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your time. This has been
you.
Awesome.
It was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad.
Thank you so much.